Right now at 5, a new federal lawsuit is challenging North Carolina's new voting maps.
All right, so this is the third legal challenge in recent weeks, and plaintiffs say Republican lawmakers targeted black communities to lessen their voting power. The lawsuit, though, challenges all three sets of new voting districts for the U.S. House, the State House, and the State Senate. Plaintiffs say the new maps violate the Federal Voting Rights Act and the U.S. Constitution. The maps were redrawn in October. Republican lawmakers who drew them say they did not consider race. If the maps are upheld, they are expected to be used through the 2030 elections.
Let's bring in now Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes. So, Khalif, the groups that filed this most recent federal challenge are the state NAACP and Common Cause. They've had success in challenging voting maps in the past. So do you see that this lawsuit is going to have any success of that?
It really will just depend on the temperament of the justices that hear this type of case going forward. And the reason I can say that is because if you're talking elections in North Carolina for the last 10 to 15 years, you're talking about maps being redrawn. Remember, the courts have said in the past that North Carolina used surgical precision to disenfranchise African-American voters in the past. And so there is an established precedent in history of that occurring. That's why you see Republicans always saying race was not something that was considered. But if you lay the maps down and you look at these areas where there is an abundance of African-American populations, they have in the past, and it appears in these maps, went out of their way to make sure that those African-Americans that are in specific districts are kind of divided. Why? If you dilute those African-American votes in those areas, it's less likely that an African-American candidate will be elected. And if it's less likely that an African-American candidate will be elected or that African-Americans can vote in a block, it's less likely that a Democratic candidate will win. And so, in theory, your lawsuit has to be based on race, and that's the only way it gets there, by pointing to African-American disproportionately being disenfranchised.
And one of the things I have learned from you, Khalif, is it is all about precedent and what you can be able to show. And with that, so there was a similar case this summer in Alabama that happened. Do you think that that ruling will impact what will happen here in North Carolina?
Well, you got to look at it. Right now, we're at a unprecedented type of time in history, and we've talked about that a number of times. Alabama, they got slapped down by the court, and they tell them that they, again, have disenfranchised African-American voters. What did the court say? Go back and redraw the maps. What did Alabama say? No, we don't want to do it. And so they had to go re-sue them again. And the court said, did you not hear us before? We've told you that you guys have disenfranchised African-American voters. All this happened this year. Go rewrite the maps. And now they're rewriting the maps after the court had to tell them twice that they've done the exact same thing. They just disregarded the court's opinion. Do I think that it will be precedent? Yes, I do. But historically, this district, the Fourth Circuit, is looked at as one of the most historically conservative circuits in the nation. And so do I believe that it will be controlling? No. But do I believe that the eyes of the country are watching based on what happened in Alabama? For sure.
So with that point, though, if you're already saying an area is already conservative, and then if you're redrawing these maps, kind of explain that a little bit, because I think that's where people have the disconnect of saying, well, then how are you... how are people saying you're looking at race versus what you've seen in historical?
So my comment in terms of being conservative, the bench, the court itself, the Fourth Circuit is extremely conservative in terms of their rulings and the judges that sit on there. But in terms of the areas, no, these are areas that are heavily diluted with African-American populations, heavily diluted with Democratic voters, and that are being split up apart. There's some types on the maps when you have North Carolina A&T, for instance, where they split it right down the middle. And so if you're on that college campus, you could be voting in two different districts.
Thanks for clearing that up, because I think a lot of people hear that and they're not understanding in terms of the constituents that make up the voting population versus people who are making decisions on the voting population.
You do such a great job at breaking down the convoluted content for us.
I don't know how you do it, but you do it.
I try.